This is 94.3 WRHT-FM, Farmville, Washington, Greenville. Broadcasting to the Pirate Nation and beyond at 943thegame.com. Do you live ECU? Do you breathe purple and gold? Are you ready to hoist the colors? Now, time for the most in-depth look at the world of ECU athletics. Welcome in to Hoist the Colors with your host, Stephen Igo on 94.3 The Game. Watch the show live on Facebook and at 943thegame.com. Now, here's your host, Stephen Igo.
All right, welcome into the program. It is Wednesday, May 24th, a very exciting edition of Hoist the Colors to bring you. We've got two great guests. We've got Anthony Broom from thewolverine.com who will join us as we take an early look at ECU Michigan. We're going to start our opponent previews here on Hoist the Colors on 94.3 The Game for the upcoming football season. We also have an in-depth chat with American Athletic Conference Commissioner Mike Aresco, who joined us yesterday, and we didn't know if we'd get the interview in or not due to, obviously, the game, the ECU baseball game starting, and that ended up starting just shortly after we took the air, and the interview's about 30 minutes long, so we're going to have that for you later in this program. We'll talk to Anthony here shortly about the upcoming game against Michigan. Just wanted to talk first about the baseball game, of course. Last night, or yesterday afternoon, just a really pretty stunning loss for East Carolina baseball, and several thoughts on it. The season's not over. The Pirates get to turn around. They get to play today at 3 o'clock against Cincinnati in an elimination game, and even if they lose today, they will still play postseason baseball next week. And I just want to remind folks that the one time ECU did win a road regional at Virginia in 2016, they did go 0-2 in that specific conference tournament. So, yeah, the sky might be falling as of last night, but the sun did come up. It is a new day. We'll see what happens. Again, scheduled first pitch, 3 o'clock. We'll have that on 94.3 The Game here later this afternoon. And Scott Rogers will be on the call. There is some weather in the Clearwater area, and we'll see, if they get the game in on time. Florida weather can be very tricky, so we'll keep you updated there. But just overall, just hard to believe kind of what unfolded in the 8th and 9th inning. 9-3 lead for East Carolina, and it just seemed like we were all looking ahead to Thursday. And got to give South Florida credit. I saw some people call it a collapse, and in some ways it was, but it's not like ECU was out there walking and hitting a bunch of guys. South Florida was just hitting the ball all over the ballpark and doing it against East Carolina's best relievers. So we'll see if the Pirates can regroup again today. 3 o'clock will be the start time for that game against Cincinnati in the American Athletic Conference Tournament. But we're going to talk some football to lead this show, and we're going to do it with a friend of mine, a former colleague of mine. I'm told he's on hold, so we're going to head out to the phone line. Welcome in Anthony Broom of thewolverine.com. He covers Michigan. Of course, September 2nd, we've got East Carolina at Michigan for the first time ever in football. And Anthony, good to talk with you again, man.
Yeah, it's great to reconnect. I appreciate you thinking about me. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and wish my summer away, but the fact that we're going to sit here and talk about that opener today, I'm excited, man. Like it's, like I said, not going to wish away the next few months, but football is, all those football preview magazines are starting to hit the newsstands. We're working on ours right now, so just fired up to be here chatting ball.
Yeah. Well, before we get into this matchup specifically, and I do want to kind of pick your brain about just what it's like to take in a game at the Big House and all that, because every ECU fan I talk to says they're going on the trip. I don't know if they're actually going, but they at least act like they are. So we'll get into all that. But let's first educate our audience on your background, Anthony, how you started covering Michigan. And, me and you, for those who are unaware, we used to actually both cover the NFL for 24/7 Sports. I wrote about the Panthers, and you covered some other teams as well. That was a fun time earlier in our sports career, and it's awesome to see you at On3 now with a great company covering Michigan. So run us through your background and how you got to cover the Wolverines.
Yeah, no, those were great times working on the team with you. That was actually my first job after graduating. I graduated from Central Michigan University, so I'm a Maction guy by trade, but I started writing Michigan for the SB Nation site Maize and Brew back when I was at Central Michigan, just kind of as a way to get get some stuff, some writing samples out there, way to get some reps in the industry. And one thing led to another. I wound up working for that site for 8 years and ran the site for about, I want to say 6 or 7 years. So that site kind of became my baby in conjunction with, the work that we were doing on that NFL team at 24/7. But a couple of falls ago, I think it was the fall, about halfway through the 2021 season, I got the call from On3 and the Wolverine.com offering me a spot on staff. And I've kind of just been rocking it out with those guys ever since. So I have wore a lot of different hats. I think I covered maybe 4 or 5 NFL teams in the time that we worked together, just in different capacities. But to have had a voice in our market as long as I have with the Michigan stuff, both with the SB Nation site and now over at the Wolverine, it's been a blessing for sure. A lot of hard work to get there, but this would be football season number 10 for me overall, covering this team. And obviously that stretches throughout the entirety of the Jim Harbaugh era too. So I've seen a little bit of everything at this point.
Yeah, I want to talk about the Jim Harbaugh stuff because just from the outside looking in, I mean, clearly one of the best coaches in football, whether it's pro or college, but he just seems like such an interesting character. What is it like trying to, I don't know, is he good with the media? Is it, like trying to pull teeth at times? And we can get into some of the NFL stuff every offseason, but what's it like trying to work with Jim Harbaugh as far as a media perspective?
Yeah, well, he is nothing if not unapologetically himself, and that can be great. He's always makes for an interesting quote or a metaphor or a Harbaugh-ism, if you will. But yeah, things can be a little bit locked down in terms of football stuff. I mean, I know, anyone who's been around the sport or covered the sport knows that a lot of times when these coaches talk to media, they guard information like it's nuclear launch codes. And Harbaugh is definitely a guy who falls under that category. Again, it just seems like there's always something, and it's not even it's not necessarily controversy, but especially in those early days, he's always in the headlines. He would do the satellite cam through SEC country, and he had a Twitter account, and would fire off his tweets and all those types of things. But things have definitely calmed down with him the last few years, outside of the fervor around potentially going back to the NFL. Though I'd argue that that's more of a media and backdoor channels creation than it is Jim Harbaugh himself. But yeah, he is one of one. He's a completely unique guy. I've never encountered anyone like him. I doubt that I will ever encounter anyone else like him, whether it be personally or in a professional capacity. But he is, this aura. He just has this aura and a presence about him where, you know immediately when that guy steps into the room. And I think that, that can be a detriment to him at times, but a lot of times, especially when it pertains to the football side of things, I just think he's, I think he is by and large the rising tide that has lifted that program, and has an uncanny ability to find and identify up and coming young assistant coaches. I think right now he probably has the best assistant coaching staff he's ever had at Michigan. So things can be frenetic, but they're frenetic and stable at the same time. It's a really interesting dynamic.
We're visiting with Anthony Broome. He covers Michigan for On3, the Wolverine.com. And Anthony, back-to-back playoff appearances for Jim Harbaugh's team after a 2-4 season during the COVID year, which was just a weird year for everybody. But when you look at the last 2 years, and I know that making the playoffs was a goal, it had to be disappointing for them at least to lose the TCU game last year. They were fairly heavy favorites, I know. How do you kind of handicap that situation? And are the fans still thrilled with Harbaugh? Are they upset that he didn't, make the championship game or hasn't won a championship yet? And clearly expectations are always extremely high there. But where do you feel like the expectations fall right now, and how has he lived up to those?
Yeah, the expectations and just how everything's viewed has changed. It changed so rapidly between that COVID season and what's happened in the last 2 years. There was a very loud portion of fans, and some media people who thought maybe after the COVID year that it was time to kind of move on. It had been 6 years, and they weren't any closer to beating Ohio State. They weren't any closer to winning a Big Ten title. But these last 2 years, I think that, first and foremost, that TCU game, I don't think anyone's happy with that. Now, as time heals all wounds, obviously, but, Michigan comes into that game undefeated, and they played their worst game of the season and still kind of have a chance to win it late by this, furious comeback that they make. And, that was a missed opportunity. And I think for them, I think that's kind of served as fuel heading into this season, because you have a lot of those guys, most of those guys coming back. I mean, they sent 9 guys to the NFL draft, but the biggest storyline with the draft for Michigan was all the guys that could have gone that didn't. So for them, I think that serves as a big motivating factor. I think the fan base, given that the last 2 years, 2021, you beat Ohio State for the first time, and last season you go to Ohio State and win for the first time since the year 2000. You've won back-to-back Big Ten titles, and those are heights that they hadn't experienced under Jim Harbaugh or anyone else since 2004. So I think that's satiated a lot of the frustrations over how the postseason has gone the last 2 years. Now, that's kind of the elephant in the room now. You've built yourself all the way back, but you haven't been able to get over that hump and compete in bowl games. I mean, they won Jim Harbaugh's first bowl game in 2015 and haven't won one since, whether it be it's the regular bowls or the college football playoffs. So that's kind of the next narrative that needs to be checked off. And when you have a team as loaded, as a lot of positions as they are, as talented as they are, as the expectations that they have, for them to, if they get to the playoff this year, and let's just say they don't win that first semifinal game again, it's going to get a little bit, I won't say heated, but you start to wonder if you've kind of capped yourself off at what your potential is. And I think that's kind of the lingering conversation behind the scenes. But right now, I think the narrative is just that 25-3 over the last 2 years, you have a great shot to run it back again, win another Big Ten title, beat Ohio State, get back to the college football playoff. I think there's a lot more excitement over the possibility of that than kind of dwelling on how the last 2 years have gone, because it comes from the perspective that the 6 years that preceded 2021 were just so up and down.
We'll visit with Anthony Broom, who covers Michigan. And, of course, East Carolina will be the opening opponent. Michigan is paying ECU a cool $1.8 million. And typically they're going to be big favorites in a bye game. And, obviously, they are big favorites. I don't think anybody on ECU side expected Michigan to be as good as they are now when they scheduled this game. But still, clearly I think the first line came out at 36.5. And ECU, if this was the last 2 years, maybe that number's a little lower. But they're replacing a ton of production on both sides of the ball after back-to-back bowl seasons. But what's kind of is there any excitement on Michigan's end welcoming East Carolina to town? I'm sure, it's not the marquee non-conference opponent, but maybe a little bit better than some of the other opening opponents Michigan has had in recent years as far as non-conference play.
Yeah, I mean, last year Michigan was kind of lambasted for its non-conference schedule. It played Colorado State, UConn, and Hawaii, and that's no one's going to sit here and sell to you that was a murderer's row by any stretch. So I think inherently the non-conference slate for this year should be a little more competitive. I think the buzz with that game right now, and again, I don't know if I'm breaking news here or if you guys have heard it at all, but there is a little bit of buzz for people that we've talked to that opening game could be a night game, and there's always excitement for that, especially state of Michigan. Could be one of those last weekends that we have kind of nice, picturesque weather up here for that. So, I mean, that's where the excitement is right now. I think a lot of it too is, just the excitement for the season in general. I mean, East Carolina is a team that Michigan hasn't seen before at the Big House. There's always intrigue in that. There's a little more juice to it than if you just brought, a Western Michigan in or one of the directional MAC schools or something like that. So given that it's a different opponent, different jerseys, different helmets, something we haven't seen before, and the fact that it could potentially be under the lights is something that a lot of people are kind of fired up about around here. So for that, I mean, that's where the juice comes from that perspective. I mean, I know people are going to look at those Vegas lines and go, well, there's just nothing here. But anytime you get to see an opponent you haven't seen before, in potentially a late afternoon or night game atmosphere. It's your first look at the team that you're going to field for the 2023 season. I think there is a lot of excitement for that.
And obviously, it's no secret that, Appalachian State had the upset of the centuries years ago. They're another in-state school that, East Carolina is competing against now. They were at even a lower level when they pulled that upset. I don't know if there's any parallels to draw from there or not with another North Carolina school coming to the Big House to open up the season. But is that game still talked about as much as it is maybe in other parts of the country up in Ann Arbor?
No, it seems like everyone else always wants to talk about it, but people in Ann Arbor are just, kind of put your hands over your ears like the old earmuff deal. And, every time there's a season opener, it's on College game day, or every time there's some kind of upset with another team that maybe loses to an FCS, that game gets brought up. So it's kind of there. And I'll give you one interesting parallel, because, I can't sit here and say that that's something that's on the table for this game this fall, but the last time Michigan kind of had expectations similar to what we're going to see this season, where you're running it back with a lot of guys from a team that was loaded the year before, was that 2007 season. And, you come out right off the bat, they lose to Appalachian State, they get smacked around by Oregon the week after that. And, by the time the season's over, they'd recouped a little bit of momentum, but they went 9-4. So, if you want to, from a Michigan fan perspective, I've seen some people kind of mention that, hey, let's tap the brakes on the hype a little bit because we've seen this happen before. So, yes, it does come up. There are a lot of people just mentioning, the Mountaineers or Appalachian State, they start to get the shakes a little bit. But, you would think that time would heal all wounds. But, sitting here 15 years later, it's still that's still the low point. And there were a lot of low points that came after that. So that's saying a lot.
The Big House will be the venue for the game on September 2nd. And for East Carolina fans making the trip, any recommendations on what to try and experience on game day? I'm planning to go myself, looking forward to it. I've never been. So what could you recommend? And I know that some hotel rooms are getting booked up quickly, obviously, in the area. So, is there a spot to stay outside of town? Should people try and stay in Detroit? Do you kind of have any idea what you would recommend ECU fans making the trip as far as those things?
Yeah, first and foremost, I would definitely say get yourself in the night before. Check out downtown Ann Arbor, kind of unencumbered by the game day atmosphere. Because it is, I think, again, biased because I'm spend a lot of time there, but it's one of the better college towns in the U.S. So definitely get in there and be able to stoke that up. If you can't find yourself a whole hotel room in Ann Arbor, look around Detroit Metro Airport. That's probably about a 25 to 30 minute drive, or Uber, whatever it is from there. But it seems like when I know of people that come into town, that's kind of where they tend to stay. I live nearby there. I'd love to put you up. I don't have the room for the thousands of ECU fans that will probably come into town. But, game day atmosphere wise, definitely you want to check out the tailgate at either a Pioneer High School across the street or on the U of M golf course. Again, it's all weather permitting. But, part of me hopes that it is a night game, because if you're able to come in for that, those tailgate lots will open at like noon or something. So you kind of get to have that whole day on the golf course or at the high school across the street. And it's just one of the iconic venues and atmospheres in college sports. Get into the stadium early, watch all the stuff with the band on the field and all that. It's really awesome. So, if any of you guys are considering coming out or on the fence about it, I can't sit here and say it's a bucket list thing to do, because I don't know what your priorities are, but it's definitely consider making the trip, because it's a good time. And like I said, one of those picturesque kind of college football environments.
Last thing for you, Anthony, before we let you go, and obviously Michigan's going to be a top 5, top 3 team, if not preseason number 1, and clearly a ton returning, which we got into, a ton of expectations for all those returners and what's coming back. But are there any areas of a concern on paper for Michigan that other teams may try to take advantage of early in the season? Like, what are the big question marks, if any, for this team?
I think the biggest one right now is the number two cornerback job. I mean, they graduated and lost a lot of guys from last year's room. Will Johnson is a sophomore, a former 5-star guy, and he's as good as any cornerback in college football. I think when the time comes, he's probably going to be a top 5, top 10, top 15 pick in the NFL draft. But there's not a lot. There's nothing proven around him. You have younger guys that can step into bigger roles, but until you see it, you can't check that off the list as not a concern at this point. In other spots, I think backup quarterback, things could get a little shaky there if something happens with J.J. McCarthy. I mean, they just, typically your backup is typically a guy where, maybe it's not in the cards for him to play a ton this year, but he's competing for your starting job down the line and maybe is your future starter. I don't see that on this year's team, so that would be a concern to me. But just about everywhere else, they're pretty deep. Wide receiver would be one where I don't know if they have a legit bona fide number one guy, but still have plenty of options there as well. So, but right now it's backup quarterback and number 2 cornerback, and I'll even throw special teams in there as well. They lost both their punter and their kicker were drafted last year. They're shuffling some things around there. They feel like they have good guys there, but same deal with the cornerbacks. Until you see those guys get into a game, you just don't know what you have there.
He is Anthony Broome. Check out his work on On3 Sports, covering Michigan for the Wolverine.com. Anthony, appreciate your time on today's program.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
That's Anthony Broome. Good to talk with a good friend of mine. And we'll get him again maybe down the road before the game on September 2nd. All right, we got Mike Aresco, the commissioner of the American, on the other side. You're listening to Hoist the Colours on 94.3 The Game.
Have you had a colonoscopy? If you're between the ages of 45 and 75, you need to be screened regularly for colorectal cancer. Dr. Philip Goldstein at Carolina Digestive Diseases and Endoscopy Center wants to keep you healthy. Dr. Goldstein provides treatment and quality care for all GI needs. Just call the office at 252-758-8181. Appointments are always available within 5 business days.
Hi, this is Dr. Philip Goldstein reminding you that a colonoscopy can save your life. Visit our website, cddgastro.com, and come see us at Carolina Digestive Diseases.
Healthwise Pharmacy rounds the bases with all of your infusion, retail, compounding, and medical equipment needs. Locally owned and operated by pharmacist Marcy Parker, Healthwise has grown to be your most trusted provider for infusion services. Currently providing in-home or on-site infusions in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. Visit Healthwise Pharmacy at 615B South Memorial Drive or call 252-295-0059 to speak to a patient service representative to find the option that best suits your needs.
Before your next fishing trip, head to Greenville Marine Outdoor Shop, just outside of Greenville on Marine Drive. Greenville Marine Outdoor Shop has one of the largest inventories of rods, reels, and fishing tackle in the area, plus accessories and equipment to help make your day on the water a success. Whether you need hunting, fishing, clothing, or other supplies, make Greenville Marine Outdoor Shop your one-stop destination. Greenville Marine Outdoor Shop, open Monday through Friday till 5:30 and Saturday to 12:30.
Steel professional-grade battery-powered tools. Whether you're looking for the performance to take on residential and commercial landscaping, or the power to get the job done in the forest or at the construction site, Steel has battery equipment built with pros in mind. From low-noise operation to relentless performance, Steel Pro battery tools are built for you and built for work. Real Steel. Find yours at steeldealers.com.
Everything you need to know in the world of ECU athletics. This is Hoist the Colours with Stephen Igo on 94.3 The Game. Back to the show with Stephen Igo on 94.3 The Game.
All right, welcome back into Hoist the Colours on 94.3 The Game. We have a very special guest joining us on the live line. He is the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference. He is Mike Aresco. Mike, welcome into the program. I'm sure you've got plenty on your plate these days with 6 new teams joining, which we'll get into, but how are things your way?
Well, thank you, Stephen. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, and hope all's well with you. Yeah, it's a busy time. You know, we've got our annual meeting coming up next week, so there's a lot of preparation that goes into that. You know, we meet with various groups within the conference, athletic directors, coaches, presidents, everybody gets together. And, and obviously there's always a lot swirling around college athletics these days, as you alluded to. But, things are going well. The conference had another great year, so no complaints from my end.
Mike Aresco is with us, and I want to touch first on the statement you put out, a lengthy statement in early May, but I think a lot of great points for those that took the time to read it. And listen, I think you've done an incredible job, Mike, of trying to fight this battle of, the Power Five versus whatever they call it, the Group of Five. And it's a shame it's happened this way. We had former ECU head coach Steve Logan on. He said kind of the introduction of the BCS in the late 1990s, he could kind of see it go in this path. And I know you've been fighting this fight for a while. When you look at your statement, what type of reaction have you gotten to it? Do you feel like it kind of accomplished the initial goals that you were hoping to? I know you've been fighting this battle a while.
Well, first of all, I appreciate, Stephen, you bringing it up. The response has been really good. I've gotten a terrific response from people within the college community supporting it. I even had some writers say, I think you're right. I think we really should start thinking about, different nomenclature, or, this isn't really, something that makes sense anymore. Even had another commissioner, call me and say, I think this is, we ought to focus on our own conferences and whether we're powerful or we're elite or not. And the whole point of this, Stephen, was to address, I think, mainly the media, although it would also apply to the college community, especially to the NCAA too, and because the NCAA tends to make that distinction between P5 and G5, and it's tied into the whole business about autonomy, which I'm not going to get into. It's more inside baseball, but those five conferences being able to create their own legislation, which they almost never do anymore anyway. But the point is, I was concerned that every time I was picking up the proverbial newspaper, which is now everything's online, but every time I'd see an article, it would say, the best quarterbacks in the P5, or the best teams in the P5, or the best this, and everything was P5 related. How realignment will affect the P5. Well, realignment's going to affect us a lot, probably a lot more in some ways than them. And I thought, we're being ignored unfairly, and we've got a great conference. And the P6 campaign was designed, obviously, to create, parity in people's minds with the P5, to be part of that group ultimately. And it occurred to me that this whole thing with P5 and G5 has just been very harmful and destructive. And we knew that, but we tried hard to be a P6, because that was what was obviously important in college athletics. That's what the writers were focusing on, and that was how you would build up your prestige, your reputation. But it occurred to me that now that we have the playoff at the top six conferences, without any preference for the so-called P5, now that we have a lot more going on, now that all this realignment has really changed the P5, so it's not really a P5 anymore, I thought now's the time to just get rid of the nomenclature. Just get rid of it. We don't need it, and we're going to get rid of the G5 label officially. It's there as part of the college football playoff. We have a separate revenue pool, but we're going to get rid of that name in the new agreement. So there won't be any official reference to Group of Five. There's no official reference to it in the NCAA legislative structure. So why not just get rid of it, and let's judge all FBS conferences equally, and let's take a look at them in terms of whether they're powerful or whether they're elite. I mean, think about it, Stephen, how ridiculous it is to say, Tulane's a non-power school even after they just beat USC in the Cotton Bowl, right? When UConn won the national championship in our conference, they're a non-power team, a non-power conference. How ridiculous is that? And a lot of teams that call themselves power teams and conferences that call themselves power conferences haven't achieved as much over the years, as we have, or often haven't achieved as much as we have. So it's just the kind of thing that it finally occurred to me that we just ought to get rid of it. And other terms you can use, the wealthier conferences, the conferences that have more resources. There's a bunch of things you can do. But we're a major conference, and I was tired of the denigration of our student athletes in subtle and obvious ways. So that was really what prompted me to write the letter. And I wanted to be comprehensive. It wasn't an op-ed, it was an open letter. So if you didn't want to read the whole thing, you didn't have to. But if you did, I think you would find a lot that talked about this issue in detail and laid out a case that I started making back in March when I issued, a brief statement saying I really, had enough of this P5, G5 divide and harmful nomenclature.
Yeah, you've made the point. Just, Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, obviously going on to the Big 12, and all of a sudden, just because of their conference affiliation, now they're viewed as that Power 5 school when clearly they've been the same power program in the American. It's just unfortunate. That's how it is. I guess, Mike, with college athletics and the media surrounding it, and I deal with it, working for 24/7 Sports, ECU often gets ignored in the Power 5 articles you referenced earlier, that sort of stuff. But what is the way to overcome maybe the media just automatically saying Power 5, Group of 5? Is it just a matter of we're going to have to continue to hammer this thing until they stop doing that?
I think you just hit it right on the head, Stephen. I think that's exactly right. You just keep hammering it home. Years ago, I worked at ESPN, and I remember mentioning to the president, Bill Grimes, that a lot of people in those days, didn't think too much of ESPN. These were the really early years. And they, even friends of mine made fun of ESPN saying, well, you do tractor pulls and monster truck shows and things of that nature. And I said to him, what do you think our strategy should be to overcome that kind of thing? And he basically said, just keep plugging along and add better programming each year. He said, there's no magic way to do it. We just have to, and he was absolutely right. And that's exactly what happened. And ESPN became a worldwide juggernaut. It's upward mobility. It's not where you start. It's what you become. And you hit it right on the head. We just have to hammer it home. I mean, we've got people in my communications department now calling the media when they use P5 gratuitously or needlessly or, unfairly, or when they ignore us when they should be talking about us. You mentioned East Carolina. It's a tremendous school and program. It programs, in football, it's like it has kind of an SEC following. I've always said that. I go back a long way with East Carolina in football. And in basketball, they've done very well. I mean, your women won our championship. You've got a lot of great Olympic sports. You're a major university, and you're important to the state of North Carolina, and yet you don't get the kind of coverage you deserve. We've had a great conference. I remember one writer saying to call the American a mid-major is like calling Gonzaga a mid-major. It's ridiculous. It makes no sense. We play at the highest level. We've been on New Year's Day 8 out of 10 years. That's all in the letter. We've been on ABC for our championship game 8 straight years ever since we started it. We are right there, and we've achieved. The other thing about P5, Stephen, I was trying to attack the competitive aspect of it. That's why the word power, it's one thing to say, okay, the autonomy 5, call them the autonomy 5. I don't care. That's, that's their ability to pass certain kinds of legislation. It's limited, and they don't do it much anymore at all. But they have that ability, and we'd like to be in that group, fine. But that's not, the word power, which indicates somehow they're powerful when maybe they're not, or they're no more powerful than we are, or no more elite than we are. And sure, we're a different conference. I've always said that. I mean, we don't have, for the most part, flagship state institutions, but we've had great schools, great programs, important schools, big schools. We've got smaller schools that have achieved at a high level. And you made the point. You echoed what I said in my letter. Just because you sign a piece of paper, you're suddenly a Power 5 school. I mean, how absurd is that? All these years in our conference, you were achieving at a high level, but you were a G5. You weren't a power school. Now all of a sudden you sign a piece of paper and you are. It's absurd, and there's a lot of absurdity tied into this Power 5. I don't know where the term came from, but I think you just have to continue to attack it, and maybe you'll start seeing some writers not use it or think of other terms to describe different conferences. Or how about just talking about FBS conferences? Let's say the top quarterbacks in the FBS. Okay, it's a division, and there are 10 schools. It's 10 conferences. Excuse me. Is it that hard to to focus on the achievements of 10 conferences, and maybe some of those conferences don't deserve to be focused on. That's fine. That's fine. Then just focus on the ones that do. But if we're one of the ones that do deserve it, we should get it. And that's one of the things I've just tried to point out. And it's a battle. It's an uphill battle. I don't have any illusions about that. I mean, I know it's not going to change overnight. It may not change at all. But you have to try, and you have to fight for your conference. You have to fight for your student athletes who are great kids, and they're great kids in all respects. So we have a great record of academic achievement in this conference. We've had good compliance. We've had a lot of good things about our student athletes aside from what they do on the field and court, and they deserve the accolades, and they don't deserve to be treated like second-class citizens.
We're visiting with American Athletic Conference Commissioner Mike Aresco. And Mike, obviously the conference expansion wheel never stops turning, and there's all sorts of rumors now about the ACC, and we'll see what happens there. There's also been rumors of even the Pac-12 looking at schools like SMU and Tulane. I know maybe you don't get too much into the rumors, but how much are conversations ongoing just behind the scenes between you and your colleagues, trying to figure out what's real, what's not? And I'm sure you always have to have a fallback plan in case something happens with, more of your teams in the American, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Stephen. We do have a fallback plan, but we don't spend a lot of time speculating on what might happen. I mean, it's pretty evident that something could happen, this summer. It's interesting. It's kind of an irony. This is probably one of the more dysfunctional periods I've ever seen in college athletics. I mean, you saw the ACC, stuff this week, and that wasn't really a great look. You've seen what's going on with the Pac-12 right now, and the whole issue with the Big 12, Pac-12, and all of that. You've seen now some issues with the Big Ten that just surfaced. I mean, it's when you chase the last dollar, which everybody seems to have done for a long time now, you're going to have conferences that geographically don't make a lot of sense, that in terms of culture don't necessarily make a lot of sense. You're going to have a lot of strange things. But there's a pattern to this dysfunction, and the pattern is that there's consolidation. And consolidation is kind of a fact of life. It's been going on throughout history in all sorts of areas, right? And that's what we've had. In the old days, you had a group of regional conferences, and I really liked that setup. I grew up in it, from my days at ESPN dealing with the CFA, and the Western Athletic Conference wasn't viewed radically differently than the SEC or the Big Ten or the Big East or the ACC. And the Pac-12 and the others were all viewed as, kind of equal in the sense that they all had something to contribute to college football. This was the CFA. And then college basketball, you had a wide range of conferences that all competed at a pretty nice level. And so it's changed. You started to get consolidation. Conferences took teams based on how they could augment their TV revenue, how they could augment their overall revenue. And commissioners and leagues are often judged just by how much revenue they're bringing in, how much revenue per team, how much total revenue. And if that's all that matters, then we're lost. I mean, it's all over. We're not going to have the kind of college sports that people, enjoy. Now, are people still going to watch the games? You've had that very unusual move of UCLA and USC to the Big Ten. Okay, it does. Yeah, I think we crossed the Rubicon with that one because, the Pac-12 was a pretty stable conference for a century. And it's sort of like Maryland, I guess, going from the ACC to the Big Ten. But geographically, this was a huge, profound change. And, you can't argue that it's good or bad. You have to see how it plays out. But are people going to watch USC, Ohio State when they play in football? Sure they are. Are they going to watch Michigan, UCLA, or Michigan, USC? Of course they are. They will. Will as many watch? I don't know. Will people get tired of what is becoming the professionalization of college sports, which is part of the consolidation? When money is the seemingly, the primary objective, and that's what's happening, and it's affecting us because we're in the upper class, but we're in the upper middle class, and so consequently, we do get picked off from time to time. And we're a victim of our own success. We've built up our programs. Our teams are doing great. And so they are attractive to these other schools. But, we're a perfect example of a conference that was a little geographically disparate, as you know. but now we're probably less geographically disparate than Big Ten, than some of the other conferences that are stretching, virtually across the country. This notion of national conferences, it's almost like these aren't conferences anymore. They're associations. They're almost like the divisions in the NFL, and that's what college sports is becoming. Now, again, if you just enjoy the games and you don't really care about that, you don't really care about players being bought, with NIL money, and not necessarily going to the school they necessarily wanted to go to because they want the money. If you're fine with that, then you're fine with it. I just don't think it's necessarily college sports as we remember it, or as what it should really be. And that's, I guess if you have views like that, you're considered old-fashioned. I can accept NIL, but this isn't NIL. This is not name, image, and likeness. This is just buying players and figuring out ways to buy players and to retain players. And that's not what it was meant to be.
Mike Aresco is with us. A couple more questions for you, Mike, and then we'll get you out of here. And 6 new teams joining the American this summer: Charlotte, FAU, North Texas, Rice, UAB, and UTSA, of course, with the returning teams in the league. What's the biggest challenge adding 6 teams in basically, one summer? I know you guys have had a few years to work on this, but, indoctrinating all those teams at one time. And then how firm are your beliefs that the American, even with the loss of Houston, Cincinnati, UCF, will remain, high up in the pecking order in college athletics like they currently have been, getting teams to major bowls and now potentially to the 12-team playoff?
Well, I think those are great questions. I think, first of all, I think the transition's been, pretty seamless. The schools that came in, we picked them because we thought they had that commitment. And, our DNA is competitiveness, and it's investing and trying to be absolutely at the top tier. But we don't want schools in our conference that aren't striving for that. We could have gone the other way and just settled for a secondary status, Stephen, but we decided that it just didn't make sense. It didn't make sense for our student athletes. We had the ability. If I were commissioner of certain other conferences, maybe I couldn't do that because they just don't have the resources. They just don't have the ability to develop the resources. Our schools do. And because they do, we insist that they have that ability, that they use it. And the schools coming in have that commitment. I'm convinced they do. That's why we took them. They're in great areas. They have good backgrounds already in terms of success and recruiting. I think they're gonna do great in our conference. And that leads to your second question: will we maintain our position at the top tier? And I think we will. I don't think there's any question. You look at UTSA's football program coming in. You look at FAU and hiring Tom Herman. You look at the success UAB's had, North Texas. And you look at Rice investing now and having a great coach and doing well. And you look at the potential that Charlotte has. It's a sleeper. They've got tremendous potential there. And they want to win. They want to be relevant. And then you look at basketball, and it surprised us that the schools coming in have done so well in basketball. I mean, FAU came out of nowhere, even though they had been building that program under Dusty May. So I think they're going to do fine. And one last thing, and this is not in any way to denigrate Houston, Cincinnati, or UCF. I mean, they made a great contribution to our conference, and they invested. They did the things. You had the great UCF 25-game winning streak. Houston's had success, although Houston, well, what I'm getting at is, in Cincinnati had great success, and we're really proud that they made the playoff against all odds. And now those 3 schools, what they do will always be a legacy for our conference. What Kelvin Sampson did at Houston in basketball, and he's one of the great people. But if you look at our league, we've had a lot of competitive teams, and we've had, Tulane and Memphis have made, the New Year's Day game. UCF was 0-15 in 2015. If expansion had taken place then, they probably wouldn't have even been in the Big 12. And yet, look what they did. And Houston has not won our championship since 2015. But they've been a good program. But so has Memphis. Tulsa was in our championship game recently. SMU's had 4 or 5 really good seasons now. Sonny Dykes built the program, and Rhett Lashley, I'm firmly convinced, is going to continue the success. And then you look at Tulane and what they've done under Willie Fritz, and you look at what USF had some good years under Willie Taggart. They were right there. They played some great games against UCF and others, and came close to winning a championship. Temple was in our championship game against Houston in 2015. They won it in 2016. So these schools have all had success, and the schools leaving have not always been our best schools. For many years, Cincinnati was not one of our top schools, and then Luke Fickell came in and rebuilt that program and did great. But we've got really good incumbents left in the conference, and the schools joining have a real incentive to absorb our DNA, and that DNA is to be highly competitive, to compete. Now, there's some things that we're going to have to deal with that are different. And we built our conference and had this magnificent success, and it has really been terrific. I don't think it's ever been celebrated as much as it should have been by the media, because this conference has achieved things that no one thought 10 years ago we'd have any chance of achieving. I mean, I'll give you an example. Memphis and you remember Memphis and SMU played on primetime on ABC, and game day went to Memphis back a few years ago. No one would have dreamed a few years prior to that would have happened. And those schools built their programs and did a great job. And now it's a question of, you've got to deal with the transfer portal where you have no year in residency, and that's a huge, huge issue. And you have NIL. It's a perfect storm. And so can we maintain, the teams we've had? Can we keep our great players? Can we, do what we've done before? I hope we can. And, I think we have to build cultures where kids want to stay at our schools. We have to continue to fight for the idea that we're a power conference. Forget about the nomenclature that we're an elite conference, because that's part of the deal. Branding matters, and branding has been an issue for us, and it could be a larger issue now when you have no year in residency. I mean, we build and we recruit kids who are maybe 1, 2, 3-star kids in football and in basketball, and we build we build a foundation, and we help them achieve, and they become great players. And are they just going to decide to leave because they're being paid more, or they just feel that they can go to I guess what you might consider a bigger stage. I think our stage is pretty big. We're on ABC, we're on ESPN, we're on ESPN2, ESPNU, we've got ESPN Plus. We've got a great network behind us. We have CBS also doing some of our basketball. So, we have everything in place here, but there's still going to be a challenge now because of the new rules in college sports, and we just have to adapt to it.
Mike Aresco, last thing for you. When you look at East Carolina's place in the American, and the kind of an interesting fit in terms of most of the teams in the league are in major markets. ECU kind of more, like you mentioned earlier, an SEC field, big, emphatic fan base, but maybe not the biggest market on paper. But you got alumni stretching into Charlotte, Raleigh, up into Virginia, D.C., et cetera. But ECU, it seems like athletically they're in as stable a spot as they've been in years with John Gilbert, Mike Houston in football. Mike Schwartz had a solid first year in basketball. The baseball team obviously humming at a high level. When you look at ECU's importance to this league, especially with some of the other teams you referenced moving on, how important is ECU finding some, consistent success, specifically in football, key to the American?
Extremely important, Stephen, extremely important. And it's interesting because in 2014 with Shane Carden and the team that Robin McNeil had, they were probably as talented a football team as we had in our conference. And they didn't win the division, but they were good. They were a good team. And then they kind of fell off the radar in all their sports. And the conference thrived even when East Carolina wasn't, doing what we thought they would do. Now they're back. There's no question about that. And when you look at what John Gilbert, the athletic director, has done, I mean, Mike Houston is a great coach. Obviously, you've got a team that is going to compete, continually now. I think at the highest level. Michael Schwartz has done a great job in basketball, and it's a tough place for basketball. Obviously, not an easy place to recruit. Doesn't have the basketball tradition that you have in football, but he's done a great job. Kim McNeil on the women's side, they won the championship. I think they were picked maybe to finish close to the bottom, and they ended up winning the championship. And the baseball, you've got a great baseball program, and it's the greatest baseball program that hasn't made the College World Series, and it's come close. It was agonizing a few years ago, last year not to make it, and a few years ago against Texas Tech. Cliff Godwin has done a great job there, and in fact, you play today. I guess they're playing USF, I think, and then the number 1 seed.
Yeah.
And they've been ranked nationally, the number 11 nationally. It's a great program, great stadium, great everything. So East Carolina has everything that our conference would want. And, again, the football has tended to drive the perception, as you know, Stephen. Fair or not, basketball is important to us, and we've had great basketball over the years. And we've been to the Final Four. We won a national championship. We've been to the Elite Eight. We've been to the Sweet 16. We've had heartbreaking losses with UCF and Duke and Cincinnati and others. Houston's had a heartbreaker with Michigan and others. But we've done really well there too. But, football drives it. And Mike Houston has rebuilt the program. Obviously, the team will miss Keaton Mitchell. He was a lot of fun to watch. What a great player. And Holton Ahlers, who, obviously seems like he's been there forever because he's just been so steady and good for a long time. And yet you've still got all the things in place to be a top presence in the conference. And so speaking to the importance, there's no question that these programs at East Carolina are critical now, especially as we do lose some prominent teams like UCF, Houston, and Cincinnati. Steve Ballard helped build our league. Have fond memories of what Steve did for us. And again, John Gilbert, who's our finance chair, Carolyn Doublard's our SWA chair. They are really excellent administrators, and they built really a fine program there. So I think going forward, really pleased with what's happening. There was a drought there, but it's gone now, and they'll be really important as we move forward.
He is Commissioner Mike Aresco from the American Athletic Conference. Mike, appreciate your time, and just want to say, even as a media member who covers ECU, you do a great job representing the conference. I think it's, no coincidence the conference has reached great heights with you in charge. I think you do a great job sending your message out there, trying to fight the good fight, as I say, with this Power 5 stuff, and hopefully we can put that label behind us in college athletics. But appreciate your time on today's program.
Well, thank you, Stephen. I don't play a single down or shoot a single basket. I try to give voice to the achievements of our terrific student athletes, and our administrators are the ones that are doing a great job at the various schools, and it's our job to try to run a good conference and to promote them and to make sure that they get the attention they deserve. But thanks again for having me. Always appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. That is Mike Aresco. We'll be right back on Hoist the Colours on 94.3 The Game.
Live life to the fullest. You hear that all the time, but it's easier said than done when you're in pain, right? Patrick Johnson here, QC Kinetics, in the business of giving people back their quality of life and providing much-needed relief for chronic joint pain. And it's not just providing that relief, but doing it in the most non-invasive way possible, using regenerative treatments from your body's own natural biologics. Where is your joint pain? In your knees, hips, shoulders, or back? Well, QC Kinetics concentrates these impactful treatments right at the source of your pain, directly applying healing properties where you need them the most. And best of all, you walk into the office and walk right out after treatment. There's no surgery, no downtime, and patients are raving about the results. So what does living life to the fullest look like for you? Finally being able to play golf, hike, walk your dog, enjoy time with your family. Get started today with a call to QC Kinetics for your complimentary consultation. 252-765-PAIN. That's 252-765-PAIN.
Attention weekend warriors. Before you tackle those garden or yard projects that are coming up, go by East Carolina Tractor and Fleet, your Coyote dealer. Right now, East Carolina Tractor and Fleet has new Coyote diesel 4-wheel drive tractors that you can own for under $10,000. But don't wait. This offer will be over soon. Visit the home of Coyote at East Carolina Tractor and Fleet on Highway 264 across from the Pitt County Fairgrounds or online at ectfleet.com. East Carolina Tractor and Fleet. They dig dirt.
Steel professional-grade battery-powered tools. Whether you're looking for the performance to take on residential and commercial landscaping or the power to get the job done in the forest or at the construction site, Steel has battery equipment built with pros in mind. From low-noise operation to relentless performance, Steel Pro battery tools are built for you and built for work. Real Steel. Find yours at steeldealers.com.
Attention business owners and management, Roebuck Staffing of Greenville and New Bern is here for you. Will Roebuck and his staff are committed to fulfilling your staffing needs. Whether you're a contractor, a manufacturing company, or if you just need janitorial or clerical work for your business. Roebuck Staffing also does temporary to permanent and direct hiring. Roebuck Staffing is your trusted partner for all of your staffing needs and employment opportunities. Call Roebuck Staffing at 252-364-8700 or find them online at roebuckstaffing.com. Here's some great news from the Seahorse Restaurant in Greenville. People have been coming for the prime rib on Saturday nights forever, but guess what? Due to the large demand, Danny has expanded prime rib to Thursday and Friday nights as well for a limited time. So now get the best prime rib you've ever tasted 3 nights a week at the Seahorse, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday starting at 5 p.m. till closing or until they run out. You can now have the famous Seahorse prime rib individually or for 2, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday for a limited time at the Seahorse on Stansburg Road across from the hospital.
Urgent Care Down East in Washington understands that when you're sick or injured, you want relief fast without having to make an appointment. Locally owned and operated, Urgent Care Down East, located in the Washington Square Mall, provides rapid COVID testing, flu testing, on-site x-rays, DOT physicals, sports physicals for all ages, and much more with no appointment needed. Urgent Care Down East accepts insurance and has competitive cash pricing. Call 623-2000 or visit their website, urgentcaredowneast.com, to get the care you need.
All right, welcome back into Hoist the Colours. Got only about a minute left, so we're going to wrap this thing up quick. Thanks again to Mike Aresco. Great interview from earlier in the week. Also, thanks to Anthony Broom from thewolverine.com. Tomorrow, we've got Amanda Moore, ECU Women's Lacrosse coach, in studio. So we'll talk to her about what to expect in the future and how much her program has grown in her short time in Greenville. All right, this was fun. We'll be back tomorrow at 12 noon on Hoist the Colours on 94.3 The Game.
This has been Hoist the Colours with your host, Stephen Igo. Tune in weekdays at noon for all things ECU sports. Get a recap of the show at 943thegame.com, on Twitter, Facebook, or anywhere you get your podcasts. We're back tomorrow with more of Hoist the Colours on 94.3 The Game.